Welcome to Veterans Connected, where maintenance and reliability expert and military veteran Eric Bevavino connects with fellow veterans in industry during each episode, where they exchange their experiences and discuss the transition from the military to industry and the paths and resources that led them to where they are today. The Veterans Connected podcast is proudly produced by the industry's leading network and learning community, Mobius Connect. Eric, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Bevavino, host of the Mobius Connect podcast, focused on connecting military veterans to the maintenance and reliability community. Our aim here is to bridge the understanding gap between the military and civilian worlds, thereby improving the veteran transition journey and ultimately providing hope and a helping hand to any of our brothers and sisters out there struggling to find their way. We'll do this by interviewing veterans who have successfully made it through. For this session, we've chosen to interview one such Navy veteran, Howard Penrose, whose fascinating and patriotic story is a must listen for anyone interested in joining us on this mission. Welcome, Howard. Thanks for joining us. How's it going?
Thanks for having me on board.
Yeah, on board, baby. Another Navy veteran. I think we've had probably at least over half Navy, and that has nothing to do with the fact that I'm a Navy veteran too, but just happens to work out that way.
Oh, it seems when you go into any maintenance department now and you ask where people are from, it's more than half are Navy.
Yeah, I wonder what that's about. I think it's probably the floating machines that we're on, if we're in the surface Navy or sub Navy, even in aviation, that require maintenance or they'll maybe sink or light on fire or
pretty much
not be mission capable, right? So where are you calling us from today?
I am home for a change. Yeah, I usually get to see home about a day a week. But just outside of Chicago and Lombard. We don't identify with Chicago.
Lombard, Illinois. Yeah. I used to work in Downers Grove when I worked for Castrol Industrial. So you're probably the Embassy Suites there was one of our favorite meeting places. And isn't there a big mall? Is it the Oak?
I'm looking at it right out my condo window right now. Yep. New York. Yep.
It's funny. In your background, I see wind turbines and oil pump jacks. So I don't remember those being in Illinois when I was there.
No. That's a background from Western Texas. It's better than seeing my dining room.
Funny. We are in the age of Zoom calls. For those listening, we are. Howard and I are actually looking at each other so we can have like a normal conversation while you're just listening to it. So hopefully it's worthwhile and very interesting. So Howard, why don't we start with who you are and what you do today, and then we'll dial it back to the early days.
Now let's see. President of Motor Dock LLC, which is a veteran-owned small business, nice. Specializing in electric machines from design to maintenance to you name it, and electrical reliability programs, quite sizable ones in a lot of cases. At the same time, I am co-owner of a gym, the largest powerlifting gym in the United States, and we run a lot of the meets at our facility since we moved into the 30,000 square foot facility right ahead of COVID. I mean, like a month ahead. So we survived that and actually ran the only world meet in 2020 in October.
Oh, that is cool. Yeah. So you're a power lifter, I guess. Is this a passion of yours, or you were?
Just a little bit. Started in the Navy.
A little bit. Okay, nice.
And then right now, I'm involved in a large number of IEEE standards development for electric machines, reliability, and grid distribution systems, as well as wind and other generation types. And just this last week, was elected in for 3 years as chair of standards for wind, solar, and energy storage for American Clean Power, which used to be called AWEA, or American Wind Energy Association.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. So that's quite the task because I can't help but volunteer. Past chair of the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals and past chair of Chicago Section IEEE. And that goes all the way back to pre-Navy. So,
okay. Well, first off, we'll include in the show notes, if you don't mind, forwarding, your business addresses, both on the electric motor piece of it, as well as powerlifting. Trying to take some notes here while we're going to make sure I get it right. But and then perhaps IEEE, the things that you're involved in that would potentially help out veterans that are getting into it. So
actually my LinkedIn. So I'll send you that.
That's
an easy. I got rid of all other social media, just LinkedIn now. Everything else is way too negative.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I agree.
Oh, I'm sorry. NCBM Connect. I'm definitely on there still.
CBM Connect. Gotcha. Yeah. Fantastic. So were you in electronics or an electrician in the Navy, or what did you do? How'd you get there? And where'd you grow up? What influences did you have?
Well, influences. Let's see. I was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay.
Grew up in St. John's, Newfoundland.
Oh, wow.
Up through the age of 13. My dad was head of the fisheries department. I got to see lots of the Atlantic.
I've been there, by the way.
Oh, really? Yeah. I was
a midshipman cruise. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually went to school at St. Bonaventure, the big basilica, and hung out down by the harbor. So, and then, when I turned almost 11, so I'd say when I was 10 years old, they allowed me to become part of the American Air Cadets. Canadian Air Cadets, not American Air Cadets. And went through survival training and a bunch of other stuff up through the age of 13 when we moved to the States. So I already had a little bit of military experience in my background. That was kind of a weekend a month type thing, except for the 1 week each winter where they dumped us in the middle of nowhere and we had to survive our way to the nearest road. So
fun at 13. Wow. That's
Usually you had to be 16, but I knew people, family knew people. So it was better. I did Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts and stuff like that. This was much more fun. Got to the Scouts kind of frown at using rifles and stuff. Then while I was in the States, I was actually junior and senior year in high school. I was working at Amoco Labs as part of the Vocational Industrial Clubs of America, which still exists but under a different name, which is I've forgotten the new name, but in any case, it's still for trades, but managed to become a technician. So I was doing oil lab related stuff on the brand new first ever synthetic oil, Amoco Ultimate, something that's rather common these days is in that area. And I was also a long distance track runner. For those who know me, that's kind of amusing because I later inverted. And along the way discovered that I had the opportunity to go to either McMaster University in Canada for chemical technician or chemical engineer, I should say, or several other schools, decided that I was having way too much fun in high school and wasn't paying attention. So for whatever reason, decided to join the Navy. Nice. Really, the when I was looking the military, the macho side was, you have to remember, back then it was still the Cold War, right? 1984.
Right. Yep.
Was when I graduated. And
Tom Clancy.
Went into the military in November of that year. And what was interesting about it was, at first it was like and then I said, you know what, I really want an education. So I joined the Navy instead, and wanted to be a conventional electrician. Went through boot camp and then went through A school, and several of us, including a good friend, Roger McCoy, who was my best friend all the way through the entire 4 years I was in. They kept wanting us to go into nuclear power, nuke subs, because
it was a big deal then, right?
Yeah. So at that time, my worst class, I had to redo that class twice, was on electric motors and generators. It was actually a really bad instructor. I found out later. But so when we were finished A school, they said, "Where do you want to go?" And I was thinking, I've seen enough at the Atlantic. I want to see the Pacific. So I asked for a seagoing tug in the Pacific so I could see different places. And of course, being a little naive, not thinking they were going to give me the exact opposite, they gave me the world's largest ship under construction in Newport News, the Theodore Roosevelt. So
okay.
I was one of the first 100 on board, which are, without the air crew on board, was about 3,500 crew at the time. So it was 1,100 feet long, 99,999 tons of displacement, or as we said, 100,000 tons of freedom.
Nice.
Yep. And got to see a lot of, not very much. So
so you were a surface nuke, for those listening in that aren't familiar.
Not nuke.
Oh, not
I
nuke.
stayed conventional.
Okay.
So when I arrived, they asked me what I wanted to do, being one of the first 100, and said, my worst class was motors, so I want to be in the motor repair shop because I don't lose. So they put me in there. I was the youngest journeyman, Navy motor repair journeyman in the Navy at one point, still may be. They sent me to a whole bunch of sea schools, assuming that I was going to stay in because I had lifer written all over me. Loved coffee and, followed the rules, and kept getting pegged for sailor of the quarter, stuff like that. And in any case, ended up, that's a chief's position. So they meritoriously advanced me all the way through E5. So by the ripe old age of 20, I was an E5 as a conventional, because otherwise half the people in the workshop would have been senior to me, being all former nuke, not getting through. I think they said by the time everybody went through the nuclear power program, only 10% actually made it. So
right. Was that back when Rickover was still alive then, or was
yes.
he still in the?
Oh yeah, he was still there. Matter of fact, Lieutenant Commander Lidgett was our engineer, was our reactor officer, and he was the one who wrote the procedures for the aircraft carriers for nuclear power for the whole Navy.
Wow.
So yeah, it was. He and I would hang out down in Central Control because I also got to qualify for everything, including officer watches. So we'd kick back and we could smoke on board ship at the time. So,
don't remind me. I was in plenty.
Smoking our pipes and going through stuff related to the ship and large generators and things like that. I mean, I had quite the education in the Navy for what I still do. As a matter of fact, everything through my PhD, it's like I still fall back on my Navy stuff. Matter of fact, in my bookshelf right to the right of me are all my old Navy manuals that I still go to.
Nice. So were you an electrician's mate then?
Electrician's mate, and got to enjoy the 250 person bunk in the very back above the screws. Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. On an aircraft carrier, 10,000 tons of freedom, or was
100,000 tons.
100,000. Yeah, I missed a zero there. 100,000 tons. Yeah, big boys. And it's funny, we were in Virginia Beach, not this last weekend, but the weekend before, for a reunion. I was a hard hat diver when I was on active duty. So I had, and in the reserves, and I had the opportunity to dive on the recovery of the Monitor. And that was in 2002.
Yeah.
for the turret, and there was a reunion there. So we sat on the beach, and I knew what was going to happen, having lived in Virginia Beach while I was on active duty, that the touch and goes from Oceana would be flying by. I think they're Hornets now, if I'm not mistaken. And
still are. Yep.
They flew by, and I had to do the requisite. That's the sound of freedom, everybody. Which my kids just rolled their eyes and said, "Oh, that's loud. What's going on? That's loud." But anyway, that made me laugh. 100,000 tons of freedom. I love it. Yep. Okay, well, good. So you spent time on active duty. How many years of active duty?
Just 4. I mean, I would have stayed in, except my ex-wife said, "Nope, you're not going to stay in." So it's actually the only reason I got out. I had orders waiting for me for physical security in Keflavik. And by that time it was 88. So it was after the wall came down in Berlin. I mean, most of the kids these days have no idea what the Cold War was really like. You know what I mean? Military back in those times were, I think I saw in the news, everybody's afraid because this is the closest we've ever come to nuclear war. And I'm like, oh, no, it isn't. Not by a long shot.
Somebody needs to study some history.
It's like, oh my gosh, aircraft bumped. And it's like, I remember that was a daily occurrence in a North Atlantic cruise.
Well, without a doubt. I mean, even so I was I started in 90, and there were still, we towed a submarine. I was on a diving and salvage ship. So what they did was they removed the reactor for these decommissioned submarines, and sort of took the front, the bow and the stern, and put them together so they could be towed from the East Coast through the Panama Canal to the West Coast for holding for the future or whatever, if they ever wanted to bring them back. And I remember coming into the Panama Canal, and we were literally on a collision course with this odd looking fishing vessel that even though, of course, I had to be on the mid-watch coming into the Panama Canal at 22 years old with my German colleague who was the junior officer, and we're like, he's not going to be anywhere close to us, and came within probably within 1,000 yards, which is too close. Especially with in restricted maneuvering and having a submarine behind you. And that was remnants or residue, I think, of what was going on. They just wanted a closer look as to what we were doing. But Cuban Missile Crisis, all that type of stuff. Yeah.
Scariest one we had was in 1986, right before commissioning. No, right after commissioning, because it was our Battle E test. And we were in Cuba, and we failed the Battle E when a Russian bear flew 50 feet over our flight deck during a Steel Beach picnic.
50 feet.
50 feet.
Yeah.
It was even with the top of the bridge. So we were waving to them as they were taking pictures as we were deciding whether or not we were going to run to general quarters, or if no need to bother if they were going to do anything.
Well, that's one of their bombers, right? Big bomber, the Bear,
and spycraft. So it was
spy. Okay,
So it was right over the flight deck. I mean, dead center. New captain the next day.
Wow,
one of those. Somebody wasn't paying attention.
So you were in Gitmo. You were docked in Gitmo.
We were at Gitmo.
I gotcha. Yeah.
The elevators down, people jumping in the water. I was grabbing a hot dog and sneaking up a beer. So,
man, oh man. Yeah. I have some memories of Gitmo, basically for refresher training. And I think we actually stopped there. Did we stop there with the submarine? We might've stopped there or did something along the way. Maybe on the way back. I don't know. But in any case, banana rats and land crabs, one of the few places in the world where you can't really have sailors and Marines in the same bar.
those poor Marines.
Yeah, I'm sure it's changed a lot since we were there too. I mean, with all the wars going on and the POWs, but So okay, so What a story. So do you have dual citizenship then?
I do. And they kept trying to get me to relinquish it while I was in.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I had access to certain things because of what I was responsible for. And through the time I was running the repair shop, as a matter of fact, Motor Doc, which is my company name, has been my nickname since Captain Purcell gave it to me in 1985.
I love it.
So
I love it.
Yeah, so the PhD is because that was my nickname. And I figured might as well go all the way. Yeah, so that's actually a Navy nickname because there were other names for the person who ran the rewind shop. And I was a little religious at the time, other than playing Dungeons and Dragons, which was kind of a so yeah, it was an interesting time. Remembered, well, actually, that same trip in, I remember a destroyer trying to race us into port, and they got hit. They hit a sandbar.
Uh-oh.
So that was a
career-ending maneuver as well.
Yeah, that had to have been the worst Gitmo summer. or was it fall? It was fall.
Well, I tell you, the best thing that I remember about Guantanamo Bay is that the scuba diving's pretty spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
At least at that time, we could get a pontoon boat for about $5 from Parks. Was it called Parks and Rec or MWR? MWR is what it was called, right? And you could get 2 scuba tanks and a case of beer for probably less than $10 in pristine conditions because nobody was diving. I mean, conch shells forever. Just some really, really great diving.
We unfortunately didn't get to see anything on shore because we were having a little fun because of what happened. But we did on the way down to that, we had stopped during no, I'm sorry, that was that was an earlier cruise down south. We didn't go to Gitmo on that one. It was before we were commissioned. It was a shakedown cruise, and the captain, who everybody enjoyed at that time, he decided it was time to pull into Fort Lauderdale during spring break. So we had a lot of really ticked off college men because, we were told to wear our uniforms.
Yeah, well, those are the pre tailhook days, right?
Yeah.
And where there was, let's just pull into Fort Lauderdale spring break. I think we need to have some fun. Yeah,
well, and the personnel department puts out a call on shore and says it was called Rent-A-Rick. The idea was meant for families to, pick up sailors and show them around, give them a tour and stuff like that as whatever. And it was more along the lines of, a dating app by phone.
Yeah,
it was an interesting time, to put it mildly.
Yeah, in today's world, it's a dating app by stone tablet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Relatively speaking. Yeah. So when you you did a lot of cool things in the Navy, and I mean, anything in particular that stands out as
the captain. We were the only aircraft carrier that kept EEO4 as EEO4, which is the rewind shop. All the other ones combined that with power shop. So I had a 12-man crew that I was responsible for strictly for rewinds. And we had first choice on all motor repairs in our 38 vessel battle group. So that included North Atlantic, Russian fleet short way off, Ticonderoga's long-range radar motor fails. Somebody had a brand new fireman apprentice that came into my shop, ripped the coils out of the machine. There were no drawings available, and I learned how to design a motor through a satellite robotic voice. And I met the engineer from GE a few years later when I went to work in the civilian side. And I thought it was some guy at GE. It turned out to be a female engineer. You couldn't tell the voice. If you remember the satellite stuff. So that was quite cool.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So that was quite the experience, because I went from not knowing much about motors to being the expert. So and we had to know everything. I mean, literally, it wasn't turn around and we'll send it down the street, right? No, you were at sea. The North Atlantic was a 3-month tour.
Interesting. So they came to you guys to do all sorts of motor repair, whether it was from the aircraft carrier or the battle group, it sounds like.
Right. So the tenders would handle some of the machines that were larger, but the captain and the admiral, because we were the flagship, right? They wanted stuff on board our vessel. So we'd have stuff Harriered over all the time. It wasn't helicopter, it was Harriered over.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we would end up getting quite the variety of work. And there were odd hours. I mean, that was a 72-hour long rewind, and the only one anybody trusted to do it was myself. So I had to be awake 72 hours straight. And prior to that particular thing, I didn't drink coffee. I hated coffee. I learned to enjoy coffee and caffeine pills and anything else that would keep me awake while I was working. But I
learned to drink coffee in the Navy too.
Yeah.
So for those who aren't familiar, can you describe the process of rewinding a motor? I mean, what is it? Why do you do it? How's it done? That type of thing. And why is it important?
So an electric motor fails, and we would receive it when I was in the Navy. We would get it where the machinist mates or hull techs would have removed the end shields, removed the rotor already. We would balance it because we had the balancing machinery, and we would put it in a burnout oven on board ship. As a matter of fact, I was asked to do something else, which I re-met in my civilian side. But in any case, you would remove all the copper from the machine. You would replace all that copper. We had a machine shop just outside, and that's where I learned how to do machining. Basically, I learned all the electrical and all the mechanical end of it. Would work closely with the hull techs and machinist mates when it came to pump repairs and fan repairs and everything else. That was about it. We didn't do any transformers. Didn't have that opportunity. There were a couple, but we had too much going on, and I didn't feel like training my guys or myself how to rewind a transformer at that time. That came later in my career. So reassemble it and then test it. At the time with a non-existent test panel. There was a whole bunch of instrumentation we had to use to do all the testing, and basically the exact same stuff we do in the civilian side, just without procedures. There's nothing saying tighten this bolt first, tighten that bolt next type thing.
Interesting.
What was interesting was knowing all that, knowing everything I learned in the Navy, in particular in rewind school. I was at one of the last ones in Norfolk, and then it moved over to just the one in San Diego, I believe. When I got out and I interviewed at a company called Drysulker, which was my first employer, that was a motor repair shop. I sat down with the supervisor, and he'd say, well, how do you wind this? How would you connect this motor? And I'm going, oh, that's an easy one. And I'd sketch it out. And he said, well, I'm going to tell the owner you don't know how to rewind. And I went, what? I just did everything you said. He says, yeah, but you'd have my job. So they hired me as a mechanic and field service person. So I that actually started my career. That decision that he made started me down a different path. Otherwise, I'd still be sitting there putting coils in machines.
Interesting. Thank goodness for small favors. Something that felt like a slight, perhaps at the time, ended up being, one of the best things.
Oh yeah. He and I became good friends later, but yeah. So it was, that was interesting. I mean, everything I did in the military didn't just transfer over. I had more experience than the guys twice my age. So I came out and I think the next youngest person at that company was 10 years older than me. Still there. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be at that shop tomorrow working on a generator for Union Pacific that we're doing an RCFA on. So,
well, and I mean, these are sort of niche skills, right? And, but very valuable. I mean, heck, if everything's going to run off electricity in the future, right? Yeah. And a lot of it runs off electricity now. I mean, yeah, the pumps and the fans that you're talking about, and fundamentally, just for my education, and probably help the listeners too. I mean, I'm a mechanical engineering guy and didn't take much electrical engineering, but just thinking about the mechanics, motors required to be rewound when there's some sort of problem, like an arc within the motor or something that destroys the integrity of the coils. Which when you're talking about coils, like thousands of feet of copper coils around magnets, I guess, or somehow in there that you pass electric current through, that makes it work, right? Yep. And then when it's broken, then you got to rewind it. Do you do that with I assume with a machine?
There's machines to do it. It's not the old tower winders I had in the Navy. They're actually automated machines now for winding coils. Although the first machine I had to use at a repair shop, one I ran in Richmond, was exactly that. The exact same model and everything else that I had in the Navy. The balancing machine was the same. Everything carried over. It was quite interesting, but that's. And then when I was helping work on the Navy's motor repair manual, and that's actually how I became introduced with dry sulker. So they had a unique stripping process that we had adopted on shore repair facilities. I keep thinking NISU because I did a lot of work with the Coast Guard later in my career, and actually last week just got roped back in with NAVC on some stuff on carriers, as a matter of fact. So yeah,
and for those not familiar, it's funny,
through my whole career I keep looping back to the Navy.
I mean, the Defense Department has a lot of equipment, right?
Just a little bit.
Biggest transportation or industrial complexes in the world, and NAVC, for those who aren't familiar, and I'm only familiar from the diving side of the business, is the engineering component, if I'm not mistaken, of the Navy. It designs specs and ships and procedures and all that type of stuff. So really, really cool. And for anybody listening, I mean, this is not only helpful, which we'll get into next, which will be transitioning from the service, but understanding what folks who are in the Navy or other services, when they're trained on electrical systems, components, power, that type of stuff. I mean, really, this is quite detailed in the sort of things that now you had to be, like you said, rule follower. You're, sort of taking the initiative, ambitious to do more and all that type of stuff. It's not just handed to you. No. When you're there, you have to take on a certain attitude, and when you do, you get more. I mean, it's the curse of the competent, right? You get more if you're noted as good or capable or happy doing as much as possible. Then you get more piled onto your back until you get into a leadership position. And you can tell people what to do, right? Or mentor them and coach them.
It was always funny because my early exposure on the Roosevelt, beyond knowing all of the senior officers, being one of the few enlisted initially, was a rattle in a fan next to the captain's bunk. And
yes, the highest priority on the ship, mission critical.
It was, and then so were the fuses blowing and the toaster and some other stuff later on. But the biggest one was that one, because they called down, and it was our first cruise. We just got out of the Newport News shipyard, and we're out, and it was right before we turned into our own wake and peeled back the catwalk on the flight deck level. We actually put watertight doors into the ship. It was quite exciting. Those things go fast. They're literally the fastest thing afloat. We outran the Pegasus. I mean, it was pretty exciting at the time because we didn't. Some of us knew how fast we were going, but nobody else did.
So the Pegasus, for those listening, is a reference to was an airfoil.
Yep.
Is that what the airfoil?
Yep.
I don't think that the Navy has them anymore.
Nope.
We've got maybe some trimarans or catamaran hulled vessels, but at the time they were pretty quick little ships. Got up on I think it's probably called hydrofoils.
Yep.
Hydrofoils outfitted with some harpoon launchers,
Yep.
I think, maybe some other stuff, but you couldn't put much on them. And to say an aircraft carrier would outrun them,
had to generate your own wind.
Going pretty quick, quick, and outrun I suspect some of the torpedoes at the time or whatever.
Oh, you just let the tin cans worry about getting between the torpedoes and the aircraft carrier. It was, but neither here nor there. So I get a call, and I was going to have the roving watch go up. It was about 1 a.m. and no answer. And I'd known he had taken on a couple of shifts, figured he probably fell asleep. So it's like I didn't want a shipmate to get in trouble. So I had somebody else take over my watch down in central control. Went up, heard the noise, went down, tagged it out, grabbed a book, went back up, opened up the door, pulled out the empty tin can, Coke can, tossed it in the garbage, shut the door, sat down, read my book for a half an hour, turned everything back on. Now, we did this because somebody had signed for all of the equipment being delivered to my shop, which included balancing and vibration equipment. I didn't have balancing and vibration equipment. Those apparently had gone somewhere else. So we had to come up with unique ways to do field balancing and vibration testing at the time. So it was, and none of it was recorded or electronic. We had strip tape type stuff at the time. When I went off to Dry Sulkers, matter of fact, they pulled out an IRD 880. And all it took for me was to understand how to control the IRD 880. And it directly related to the Dynabal I was using on board the aircraft carrier. So it was, that's really how I started. I mean, we had to be electrical and we had to be mechanical.
And flexible
and very flexible,
ingenious, right? To use your knowledge to make things work without perhaps the most appropriate tooling instead of just giving up, right?
Extremely. I mean, you talk about team. My job as a supervisor was to stay in between everybody else in my crew. And I continued. That's the type of leadership I've had since then. And I've run some fairly large organizations. Now I'm an independent consultant. I decided I like having fun playing with my toys, and instead of all the other stuff, I'm at that stage in my life. So,
that's good. Yeah. So why don't we go to that next? Your transition out of the Navy. I mean, was it streamlined or was it clunky?
No. First thing you learn is you're going to get sick for about a week or two. Because you go from being in a controlled environment to an uncontrolled environment, at least at that time. So I came right off of a cruise right before they went on their first Mediterranean. So I missed that, but we had come back from being at sea for a little bit. So I came back and they didn't think I was going to make it because I'd say I missed half my first 3 weeks. The other part of the challenge was there were no procedures, no written procedures, no instructions, and then I had a family. the short. Actually, I was single initially, and then my first roommate, luckily, turned out to be some friends of mine. Go, hey, this guy's looking for a roommate, and I walk in, and on the wall he had a picture of the Roosevelt and the Eisenhower, and I said, oh, I remember that picture. It was in Wessenfjord. They had the two ships side by side and took a picture. He goes, yeah, I was in the hangar bay waving at the Roosevelt. And I said, that's great. I was in the Roosevelt waving at the Eisenhower. So the first thing that worked out was two, recent Navy veterans became roommates until my fiance moved up from Virginia. So we immediately had children. I mean, I was 23 when my first was born, going to school full time. I was a competing bodybuilder, and I was doing motor repair and rewinding, and a little bit of rewinding when I'd get the chance, and machining and everything else during the day, and going to school in the evening. And somewhere along the way, still trying to figure out how I did between 15 and 20 hours a week in the gym.
Mm. Well, this is common. I'm now in a graduate class online. I decided to, in my mid 50s, engage in that, which is fine. It's fun.
Yeah.
I've got some capacity in business analytics. They created a master's of science program. But the point is, I'm in with a bunch of 20 or 30 something, either current active duty military people or recently transitioned.
Yep.
And the first thing that they ask is, what's your profile? What are you doing? And these guys and girls are doing what you're talking about,
yep,
like 100 different things at the same time. And it blows my mind. I mean, I had a clunky transition too, but I wasn't trying to start a company, start a family, be a bodybuilder, do all this at the same time. I mean, it's like, how the heck do people do it? But I think it's a theme of being capable, being very busy all the time, and not just busy like to be busy, but actually, there's so much to do on a ship and, in the service in general, that the military does keep you active and keep you humming and looking for more. So,
or sitting around doing nothing but having to be active.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Half steering watches. Oh my God. You get caught falling asleep in aft steering, you're in trouble, right? At midnight.
But for good reason, right?
Had to be awake and alert, but nothing was going on. I mean, there were so many redundancies.
That's right. That's right. You're busy until you're not, but you had to figure out, and what else was there to do other than just continue to progress.
So the transition was kind of fun. Two things I did. One is I started working for the company, ended up going to Virginia because the problem I had initially at the company, which changed later, was it was very autocratic. They had, Henry Dreisilker, who I learned a lot from. As a matter of fact, how I deal in business, I learned from him, because at the time I didn't appreciate it, but there was no compromise. If I go in and I say, this is what it is, this is what it is. And I've had companies say, well, if you want to do business with it, I say, no, if you want to do business with me, this is how it works. That I even did at General Motors when I ran their facilities group and actually did it. Everybody's willing to back down because of the size of an organization. It's like, no, if you have something of value, they're willing. If you surrender, I learned this in the military, and I learned it from Henry, if you're willing to surrender your principles right away, or you're willing to back down on your level of knowledge, it's taken for granted, plain and simple. The other thing I learned was share like crazy. So I got lucky when they brought me back. Now, I went down to Virginia in Richmond, and I lived in Gloucester. And for those people who know that's a 75-mile each direction trip to work for $10 an hour. Even in 1991, that was not a lot of money. I made that in high school at Amico Labs, right? So, but yeah, at that time, at that time in high school, I worked there during the day, and at night I worked at a radiator repair shop, and in between I ran track. So being actively involved in stuff going in the military wasn't a big transition. Coming back out and realizing, there's nothing to do. So I have to fill that time. And that's what I did. I found ways to fill that time very quickly. When I came back from Virginia, because the owner's son had taken over, Leo Dreisilker, who to this day remains a friend. Now, mind you, I work with a lot of repair shops now, so I'm not giving any one particular one, the thumbs up, but I had a lot to do with how they do business, right? So over the years. So he had me come back, and I took over field services, and then became head of engineering, director of engineering for the company, started designing machines. In addition to everything else, usually it was unique stuff that nobody could figure out, because I had learned in the Navy, learned how to design on paper. So everybody even then was restricted to coming up with machine designs, whether that was the coil for a magnetic chuck for a machine tool, which was one of my first ones, to a motor that would survive in a 2000 degree Fahrenheit environment, to later in 2003, the blood-cooled LVAD heart pump. And then, of course, I'm one of the designers of the hybrid Tahoe X20R, the insulation systems. The board of directors of GM asked me to shoot the engineers and ship the products.
Nice.
Then got involved in the Volt, and then got pulled into John Deere for the 644 and 944 hybrid tractors. So, so
impressive. Yep.
All of that started as a winder in the Navy. And I still look back because, I got out, and school was the Illinois Veterans Grant, which is 4 free years. It's still there. If people are listening, have gone in within 6 months from Illinois and go back to Illinois within 6 months, you get 4 years of free school at any state-funded college. So that's nice. UIC, where I later taught, to NIU, to College of DuPage, to anything along those lines. So, and then I had, what I put into the Veterans Grant, right? My share. I think it's a different program now, but there's funding there. So when I got done everything through my PhD, which I primarily did online, which was, back then not the thing. Now it's everybody does it, right?
For sure.
But back then, that's the only way I could do it, because I was always traveling somewhere. I mean, I've been traveling all over the country. It's funny, when I joined the Navy to see the world, I saw Newport News, Cuba, a couple of Germany. I mean, right. Germany was kind of fun. But that was about it. A couple of the Caribbean islands, but it wasn't what I'd planned. I mean, heck, I didn't even fire a weapon in the military. You know what I mean? It was like, I've seen more of the world. I've had a private tour of the Forbidden City by the government over there. I've been to Korea every quarter for 5 years in the early 2000s, overseeing reactor coolant pumps for their South Korea. And, Australia, I think the only places literally the only countries over there I haven't seen were the Philippines and the Hawaii.
Well, and I think that goes perhaps to the confidence instilled in the craft, right? Oh, yeah. I mean, you worked at the Amoco facility, you were at radiator repair shop, you got in the Navy, and you found, this system of learning that really sounded like it inspired you and prepared you for, what was next.
And I hate when people control what I do, right? I liked making the decisions. So in 1994, I got involved in the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. Now, I'm an industrial engineer. Everybody mistakenly thinks I'm an electrical engineer. And I say, that's why I know what I know. I went that route, less math. Basically, I hated calculus. But in any case, I had to do statistics and said, I'm not sure which is better. So got involved in IEEE. And in 1994, I met, to this day, she refers to me as her brother, and she's my sister, Nancy Frost, Dr. Nancy Frost, who's a chemist. And all of the other people in the insulation materials groups for Dielectrics and Electrical Insulation Society, who became my mentors. Legends in the industry. They were my mentors. So from that time, starting in 1994, I was directly involved in writing standards. To this day, I'm still in the same groups, and those who are still around are still involved. And so a lot of my mentors are still there. As a matter of fact, one of my mentors was the college professor for my older son at one point, who's a chemist.
Wow.
And he was a dielectrics engineer. So, so had my kids early, both of them, both boys. One's now a double E, and the other's a chemical engineer who is designing things like materials that generate power.
Nice.
So you could wear a T-shirt that generates energy to charge your phone when you're out jogging, that kind of thing. He developed the iPhone 5, which is still used, the glue for the glass. He's one of the patent holders for that. That was what allowed them the reduction in bubbles, which he says to this day was an accident. Was what allowed for the high resolution images and things like that. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they watched you as kids, right? And that was after your Navy career. So they saw you inventing and drawing out designs and everything like that.
Yeah. So 97, I'd gained enough experience because I was also advising the U.S. Department of Energy and the Motor Challenge programs and the other challenge programs. So I was involved in energy back then. 97, I got involved in my first wind turbines, solar plants, and everything else when I took over as the head of the Energy Resources Center at UIC and as an adjunct professor of industrial engineering. So all of that came again from my field experience. They didn't care what my degree was because they were waiting for me to finish my PhD so they could make me a professor. But just discovered I didn't like academia. It was too slow. It was back to the bureaucracy. So I leapt out and got in the instrumentation industry with Altest. Doing the research I was doing while I was at the university and prior to that. And all that stuff that I did from the military through DOE, through IEEE, through other stuff carried with as I've continued my career.
Yeah, and it sounds like the go it on kind of on your own, but sort of team leadership, entrepreneurial spirit has carried entrepreneurial and innovative, which first and foremost is part of who you are and what you do, but it was perhaps firmed up or gave you other ideas on standardization and how things are written through the service and put together. So Howard, let me ask you this. What advice would you give to any service member planning to transition to the civilian world that you wish you had when you made that move? Sounds like you got out and you filled the time with a bunch of stuff.
I prepared. I had the job prepared for me a year before I got out.
Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah, so this is good advice, right? Thinking ahead. Yeah.
Even if I'd planned on staying in, the objective then, I mean, I wasn't planning to stay in the motor industry, the electric motor industry. My plan was to, go to college and do something different. Didn't know what at the time. Mm-hmm. I was really interested in computers, which was brand new. And what now? I'm designing, machine learning and AI stuff, as part of what I do. So there's no limit, right? Once you get out. But the biggest thing I'd say is take a look at the fact that industry is desperate for the experience that we have as veterans. I mean, desperate. You can pretty much write your ticket in any trade. They're looking for veterans. Okay, I know that when I started the government relations program, when I was an officer in the Society for Maintenance Reliability Professionals, one of the things we pushed during that time was to make sure that and got it approved that the VA covers the CMRP exam, Certified Maintenance and Reliability Professional Exam, which is basically the professional engineering certification for reliability. I mean, there's companies you go to, you can't even be, and I'm not supposed to say this, but you can't even be maintenance or reliability manager without that CMRP. And it also includes a CMRT for technicians, which is something you can study for. But I'll tell you what, everything I learned in the Navy is what pushed me through the CMRP. Then there's other ones as well. I know Mobius has a number of certifications that also carry over. I don't know what their relationship is with the VA, but it's inexpensive. It's cheap as far as getting that certification. And then those organizations are constantly trying to reach out to veterans. It is kind of funny. It's really hard to reach out to veterans. And on the veteran side, they're trying to reach out to everybody else. And there's some kind of disconnect going on. I mean, we call on one of the things that I do as a volunteer. Again, I volunteer. My whole life has been volunteering, right?
Right.
My giving back is going to the Hill every year. And I've done that since 1995 for STEM, for other things. And that was part of the reasons I started government relations in SMRP. And we go to the Hill and it's like, okay, how do we bring veterans to the trades? Because the trades are ready for them and the veterans are looking, but never the twain do meet. So, which is a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, the government doesn't want to give up the experience. And
there's this weird, so I don't know if you felt it when you transitioned out of the Navy, but I certainly felt it when I transitioned out and then continued as a reservist. It's like, well, you're, a quitter, or like, what are you doing? And like that type of thing. It's like, no, man, I gotta, I can make twice as much money over here. I have a similar experience. So my ex-wife was like, you need to, we're starting a family, you can't do it from a ship. Right. And all that. So you get that. And there's so much more to the story, right? This short thinking that, veterans can provide such a helping hand to the whole society of America. Right. And getting this right could actually help kind of change the direction of the country. I believe, right? Because you got to people, there's the demand and there's the supply, but the linkage, the pipe is not clear, or it's clogged, or it's not made, or something like that. And that's what this conversation really is in this podcast is really all about. You've got loads of experience and you did it, right? And you're saying, don't sell yourself short, get out there. The trades are looking for it. The Dixon Center, which Colonel Sutherland, our Army colonel, will be at the conference here in Indianapolis mid-September.
And I'll be there too. I'm speaking the last day, but I'll be driving from West Texas to Indiana. So I got wind turbines to test out there. So
it's all good.
So just real quick, just one last key point,
so
I don't forget it.
Please.
The main thing that I felt when I got to the military and went to the civilian side is the people that learned on the civilian side understand what they're doing. They understand, that they're working on this object and they have to do something. But coming out of the military, I understood the underlying principles, which meant I was capable of doing things that the other people weren't, because I understood why it was happening. And believe me, business owners realize the difference. I mean, you look at now, I mean, a welder starts at $75,000 a year if they just have a certificate. If you come out of the military, you're commanding a much higher price. When we visited the White House in 2018 for the Perkins reauthorization to help push that through, one of the things we ran into was the person we met with said, yeah, my brother's a mathematician. Or, I'm a mathematician. My brother's a welder. Said he makes far more than I ever did. So he had a PhD in math, and the other guy was a welder. He owns multiple houses and everything else. So understanding why you do something. I mean, the only time I ever saw somebody who could weld an aluminum can together without a seam was in the nuclear welding department on the Roosevelt. So I come out here and you see all these blotches and holes. And I mean, even the nuclear side, I mean, it's just horrible compared to what I was used to in the military. So people are looking for that attention to detail that often is missing from a civilian trained person.
Well, I love it.
Nothing against most of the people I work with, but you know, I can tell the difference. I can look at somebody and say, "Oh, which branch did you serve in?" I mean, by how they do things.
Yeah, this is beautiful, right? So the fundamental, the why, right?
Yeah.
Not the what. I know what to do. I'm going to rewind this motor, but do you know why it failed and why it's important to this steel mill or this aircraft carrier or this production line, assembly line at an automotive plant, right? What happens if that particular machine goes down? It might be safety, environmental, it could be manufacturing, could be somebody gets killed, right? That type of stuff. So the attention to detail that in the military, lives depend on it, right? Typically, if something doesn't work, and urgency, right? Sense of urgency and desire to learn. So to your point, and speed and accuracy, right? You got to get
military side, blow everybody out of the way. You show up, you understand the underlying principles. I actually got to a point where I discovered that I had to solve problems slower if I wanted people to actually do what I was suggesting.
You got to take it out of overdrive and get it back into get it in the second gear in order to make things work. And that's hard, man. That's hard.
The hybrid Tahoe, 90% failure rate on the electric machines. They'd been working on it for a year. We had to get the 2008 model out. They called me and they said, "What did you think?" And I looked down at the insulation system and I pointed at it and said, "That." And I made an enemy. Yeah, I mean, that quickly, because to me, it was really obvious. So I'd say the toughest part was the fact that you tend to know a bit coming out of the military because you've experienced it at a young age, and you're a youngster walking in and you're dealing with somebody 20 years, 30 years older, and you're seeing things they're not because of that attention to detail.
Well, and I think it's a good point, because you're poking at the emotional intelligence side, and not always are veterans emotionally as perhaps intelligent, maybe in some ways, right? Battle buddies and all that. But in the type A environment, which at least the military that I was in, where like you come in, you point out the problem, you get the medal, right? And nobody gives a shit who you offend, because you could be saving lives. In the civilian world, you offend the person that runs the division or the department or the company. I mean, that could be your job, right?
Well,
you gotta take a breath, right? Take a breath and understand the situational awareness is.
Oh yeah, and that's the important term I use. That's the same term I use. Yeah. That situational awareness, and by the way, interrupting the other speakers. Sorry about that. It's an old habit. it comes from that time. It'd be like, stop, you know.
No,
but
it's all good, man. It's
yeah,
all
so
good.
so yeah, there's a lot of resources, especially in the trade side of things. Organizations like Mobius, the Society for Maintenance Reliability Professionals, you know, groups like that are actively looking for veterans and assisting veterans. I mean, SMRP, if you're a veteran, you get a special deal on membership, you know, things like that. And a lot of
it's
veterans,
all about networking. It's
yeah,
really, and you're pointing at this membership in communities, like switching from the tribe you were in to the next tribe for the next chapter of your life, right? Because it's really the old adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah. And not kidding, not because it's cool on TV, but, you know, regardless of people's feelings about things, you know, I came up in the Reagan Navy to kind of put my views in perspective, but I'm one of the top folks in the wind power industry, in the solar industry, because it's really not political when you get down to brass tacks. I developed the only method for testing a wind turbine from the base of the tower. And, you know, I've been on, you know, that trip out to West Texas will be 4,000 towers out of 70,000. And that industry is desperate for people, and they're well paid, and you get to be outside. And guess what? Every one of those towers is like a little ship. It's got all the controls. Yeah. It's got a drivetrain. It's got everything else we work on. Nothing unique, all identical. So, you know, there's
and it's cool, industry. Right? This is renewable energy. It's cutting edge. I mean, these are the future. I mean, this is stuff
the need for technicians is through the roof. You know, and when I go to sites, half the people I meet are ex-military. Oh, I'm sorry, you're never ex-military. You're going to be telling sea stories. I turn 56 tomorrow. So, you know, you're telling sea stories all the way through now. I'll be telling them, I don't know, however long I'll be around. So, you know, they're strong memories. I remember everybody from that time. And I can't say that for a lot of places I've been. One final story, because I know we've gone a long time. Some of the funniest things happen when you get out, because you tend to all gravitate. So I started teaching at the University of Illinois in 97. In 98, a group of my industrial engineers came in, because I was teaching a class from 6 to 9 p.m. on a Friday, which, you know, industrial safety, a required course. So everybody was happy with me.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
I said, well, it was the only time we could do it. But they had senior projects to do, right? So they came in, and I'd roped them into a project. And we're talking about, I think, we had one guy from Syria, and another guy from another country, and another guy from, and gal, and you know, it basically a very mixed group. And I'm trying to keep them all roped in so we can get this project done, because it was coming up, their presentation and everything else. And they said, we want somebody that's in charge. We've got a brand new guy who wants to become part of the team. And, you know, he was in the Navy too. So they bring him in. Lo and behold, he's my former chief.
Get out of here.
So he was in charge of the
Small
project.
World, right?
Yeah. So now I was in charge. But it was funny how that works. And just the fact that the way we were brought up in that environment, the fact that you know, one person was now in charge and the other person was now following, you know, the lead follow thing. I mean, when we were taught leadership, it was, if you can't follow, you can't lead.
It's a key. That's a critical item. Yep,
never jump the chain of command, and things like that, and always protect your people. And now I'm hearing all these leadership gurus teaching people for tens of thousands of dollars. It's all, I'm going, I learned that in the military, and they paid me.
Well, and
not very well.
That's another key point, right? I mean, is that there's a real desire for leadership in the world, whether it's corporate America or the government or whatever. And I believe that the service, even though every veteran is not perfect, coming out, we have our highs and our lows. We all get similar leadership training, which is likely the best leadership training in the world, right? Tried and true for every walk of life, and it's what we carry with us today. So
again, I see it on the news, but every time I deal with the military side, because I get to still go back and consult, and every time I run into our veterans, or I visit even the coasties. Again, there's a few people who are going to get upset with me over saying that, right? But anyways, I did an in-depth project prior to Deepwater with the Coast Guard and stuff like that. I mean, that whole environment, all of those folks, we watch them come into this industry now, and a lot of our leadership, a lot of the people that we look to in our community, the reliability and maintenance community, we look at that and you say, what service what service were you in? And 9 times out of 10, they go, well, I was in Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, whatever. It doesn't matter. We joke and we still rib each other. I even did an expert witness thing once, and the judge was an ex-bubblehead. And of course, I was a target, which is a bit of a problem when he's the judge, right? And it was on hybrid vehicles. I was taking the side of I think it was Toyota, Nissan, Nidec, and a handful of others, the manufacturers. And in the end, I put together Navy sense of humor, right? I referred to it as the pink flower and dental floss defense. We won. And by the way, I worked for you remember when they had Trump on trial in Congress, or was it the Senate? I don't remember which. They had that civilian lawyer, the tall, thin guy. That's who I worked. Yeah. That's actually who I worked for. Awesome building in New York City. Got to look right over Battery Park, right? But the patent trolls came back and they were like, okay, it's this, and I'm like, this is nuts. So I was in a hotel and I had one of the machines with me, and to show that there was a separation in the insulators, I videoed myself flossing the motor. And then the only paper they had downstairs was this pink paper. So I put it in all the slots. This is how I handled things in the Navy, right? So I take a picture of that, submit it as a report. And so I get a call. Are you just making fun of their expert? I said, I thought to myself, pretty much. And he says, okay. And 2 days later, I get a call from the law firm saying, well, they settled. It got thrown out. It was
effective.
Yeah, it was effective. Unique thoughts, not following the norm. And I put that again back into the military, understanding the underlying principles, understanding how people operate, because people operate the same way. Even then, the nice thing about the military is we're trained to do things in a certain order, right? So you can see when the chaos starts in the civilian side. I'm sure you see this too.
Oh yeah.
And that helps you identify when something's not right. I always tell people, listen to your gut, because it's what comes from that. But I'm sorry, I've gone on way, way, way too long.
No, this is all, this is all part of it. And I think, as you mentioned, there is some sort of natural proclivity for military folks, especially if they take to the mechanical, the electrical, the fluid dynamics part of what they learned in the service to the maintenance and reliability community outside. I didn't know what it was, but it was intuitive to me. And through these conversations, I'm learning that it was the training that I got in my formative years that made maintenance and reliability intuitive to me when I got out. I got into lubricants and then ultimately working for Bob DiStefano and the crew at MRG.
Now that had to have been a fun company
process.
to work with. Yeah.
Oh, it was fantastic, fantastic, and it it sort of brought me back to my roots. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure, Howard. Thank you. I think we probably are out of time.
Well, I will also be at Indianapolis. I'll be speaking. Okay. I don't remember the exact time. There's a couple other great speakers that'll be there that are all veterans. Even some of my competition. There is no competition. But in any case, and you'll see we all get along great. So we're all approachable. I mean, when I'm speaking, I'm not going to be in a hurry. If a veteran comes up and wants some advice in not just the industry that I'm in, but the industries that I'm associated with, I mean, I guarantee I, as well, any other veteran there will spend the time talking to you. We consider that important.
Well, without a doubt. And thank you for mentioning that, because I think that's a commonality that I have yet to not see, or I should say it in a better way. I see it with every veteran is willingness to help.
Yep.
And, sort of for me, probably like you, the time sort of seems to melt away when you're doing this stuff, and that's how you're in the zone of giving back and helping out. So if people want to contact you, you'll be at the conference, but you're also available on LinkedIn. Is your
LinkedIn/in/MotorDoc.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Look MotorDoc anywhere, because I trademarked that thing early on.
That's awesome. I have a nickname that I'll tell you about when we're perhaps in the bar. I've got a few others, but yeah, Indianapolis that I tried like heck to get away from, and it just kept coming back to me in all sorts of different forms. But in any case, thank you so much, Howard. We really appreciate your service and your willingness to give back here. Hopefully we can help people transition more easily, stay out of the booze, stay out of homelessness, and ultimately suicide.
Because that's the toughest part. Yep. Especially now. Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. There's a lot of value that every veteran brings to the table, and we can help out.
The good news is there are programs that we have through our efforts in this industry, made sure there's funding, everything from WIOA funding to you name it. So there's organizations everywhere specifically there to help veterans and especially homeless veterans get employed.
Which, here's the connectivity, right? There's these helpful resources out there, but there's just so much, and it's a mystery of finding like that needle in the haystack, and people who are trying, I think, perhaps get frustrated. So it's guys like you and guys like me and girls and everybody else who's involved here that are going to make those connections. Yep. So the fog of the internet becomes clearer, and folks get directly to what they need to get the help they need. So
We'll chat more in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I look forward to it, my friend. I look forward to it. It'd be nice to shake your hand and meet face to face. We will be in Indianapolis for the Mobius conference there, free to veterans. And there's also going to be a job fair. So I implore everybody to take a look at the website, figure it out. And also want to remind listeners, give us 5-star rating if you enjoy what you're hearing here, and will really help us out. So finally, thank you, Howard. And thank you for Mobius for providing this platform to help both transitioning vets as well as those looking to hire them in the field of maintenance and reliability. Have a wonderful night, and thank you so much, Howard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Veterans Connected. We will see you back for another episode very soon. In between, we hope to see you in the Veterans Connected community group where you can meet Eric and fellow podcast guests and share with other industry veterans at MobiusConnect.com. And we hope to see you there.